Welcome back from lunch break. Hope you enjoyed the time away from the screen. And I also hope that you managed to mingle and made some new friends and potential collaborators from the conference platform. For now, we go into a roundtable discussion. And I'm happy to introduce two of our conference program committee members who join us in person all the way from Kenya and Uganda. And these are Aileen, Kendi, and Boby Ogwang. And they'll chair the session and will be joined by two panelists online. And they are going to discuss the topic, which is very close to my heart, building resilience of smallholder farmers through biodiversity. Building resilience of smallholder farmers through biodiversity. So let's join Boby and Aileen. Over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Bridget, and welcome everyone to this roundtable discussion. As Bridget mentioned, the roundtable discussion is dedicated to a very important topic, which actually touches a lot of the SDG goals, and that is building the resilience of smallholder farmers through biodiversity. And yes, the roundtable is going to be moderated by Boby Ogwang from Uganda, an agriculturist and a coffee entrepreneur, and my colleague Aileen Kendi from Kenya, who is a lawyer and a veterinarian. So happy to walk you through this roundtable discussion. And we are pleased to be joined by a team of incredible panelists, who I'm very happy to introduce, beginning with Ingrid. Ingrid Murray is a master's student of agroecology at SLU, the Alnap campus. Ingrid has recently been conducting master's thesis fieldwork in Uganda, where she had really a good time interacting with smallholder farmers, staying on the slopes of Mount Elgon. And Ingrid is also very involved with the Alnap's agroecology farm, which is a student-driven small agroecology farm, which is located in Alnap. So Ingrid will be joining us for this roundtable discussion. Welcome, Ingrid, to the roundtable discussion. We will also be joined by another great lady, Judith Bakiria from Uganda. Judith is a full-time commercial farmer of fruits, trees, and herbs. And Judith is the founder of Busiano Fruits and Trees in Uganda. And Busiano is very unique because it's focused on promoting food sovereignty in Africa through a very interesting theme of my family food is African. So exciting, and looking forward to hearing from Ingrid, from Judith, sorry. And Judith holds a master's degree in health and development from Birmingham University in the UK. And most importantly, she's an award-winning lady. In 2014, she won the Best Farmer competition, which is sponsored by Vision Group and the Embassy of the Netherlands in Uganda. But that's not all. In 2019, Judith was also recognized by BBC as one of the top 100 women of the year. We were supposed to be joined by Ephraim, another great gentleman. Unfortunately, because of ill health, he's not able to join us. So we'll go on with the discussion with Ingrid and Judith. So, Aileen, yes, how about you take it from there?
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. From the various time zones that you're listening to us from and you're joining us from. We are happy that you're here with us. So let me begin with Ingrid. How are you, Ingrid? Let's have a chat concerning your field study. We are aware that you studied in Uganda. You had various field work and interactions with farmers in Uganda. So tell us more about agroecological technologies on improving productivity and reducing environmental impacts. Ingrid?
Yes, thank you so much for this introduction. So what I've seen also being on the slopes of Mount Elgin, that there are so many things happening that improve biodiversity and improve farm productivity. And it like ranges from multi-layered systems, having intercropping systems. There's a lot that's happening with agroforestry. I feel like these days it's a very known concept that trees are very good for improving soil health and soil structure and water retention. Crop rotations are happening a lot. Something that maybe could use improvement and that I've seen that farmers struggle with is pest management. So I would definitely say integrated pest management is something that could be improved, but also there are already so many things happening, and I've seen farmers make like their own like local pest management mixes basically, for example, like cow urine and ashes mixed together. Also like using improved seed varieties when it's available, and all these kind of things. Yeah, there's a lot happening that farmers are already doing and maintaining.
So Ingrid, tell us more about this urine mixture. Did you encounter one? Is it helpful, or how was it taken up, or who actually came up with it?
So it was one of the farmers who told me that he usually made it. I don't recall exactly what he used it for, but he said it was a mixture of ashes and cow urine, and that it was very helpful in repelling certain pests.
Oh, okay. I'll get back to you again, Ingrid. Thank you. Judith, okay. How are you? Judith?
Hello.
How are you, Judith?
I'm fine, dear. How are you?
I'm very well. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, as a business owner and a farmer who is biodiverse with fruit trees and herbs and inviting people to come in for tourism in your farm, tell us more as a person in this business. Talk to us on smallholder farmers, how they can access markets, how they can access value chains that reward biodiversity-friendly initiatives.
Thank you very much. What we are calling biodiversity at Bosino Fruits and Herbs is what we call farming as a forest or forest gardening.
Yes.
And that concept relates to our culture. Originally, there were forests everywhere. People entered, harvested, took firewood, and they got out and the forest stayed. Over the years, the forests have disappeared. So we are recreating that concept of forest and forest gardening. And we are working with over 536 smallholder farmers whom we call small garden owners, because they have between half an acre to about 5 acres of land, and that is their whole life existence. So we are asking, can we have everything on that piece of land? But at the same time, we invite them into the farm, which is about 1,004 acres, to be what we call in-growers. And when they come in as in-growers, they grow their vegetables, their beans, their groundnuts inside the fruits, avocado, jackfruit, trees, and herbs. So as in-growers inside the farm, we have the opportunity to have dialogue and conversation over good farming practices. And that is one way. So you can see that relating to the culture that they know, that is forest, but also bringing them closer inside the garden where they can learn about the practice. And inside that forest of fruits and herbs, we are particularly promoting one single fruit called the jackfruit, or the jack of all fruits. It's a multifunctional fruit that brings food. As a young fruit, it is a vegetable. As a tree and its branches, they use it for cooking. But also the leaves are good for the animals. And then people love the fruit. It's about 35 kg when it is fully grown. It's very sweet and filling when somebody eats it for lunch. That's enough. But also I'm building on that and doing herbal medicine, because the fruit of jackfruit or the seed of jackfruit is a very nutrient dense seed, and I'm making it into flour. And this flour I blend with herbal medicine to make herbal medicinal teas, blend it with the food of poultry, chicken, very nutritious. And we're also now blending it with the food of animals. So that makes it a very multifunctional, because some of the disadvantages people may not want biodiversity is where is the income. So some of the things you must define with the community, what is the source of income? So we look at short term, if they have to have money every day. What do you sell is what I ask them on a daily basis. So they may sell their vegetables, they may sell some of the fruits. So on a daily basis, there is money. Then medium term, I always encourage them to have some small animals and poultry. At least every family to have some chicken, some goats and sheep, which they can sell in terms of emergency, in terms of school fees. Then the long term is where I'm asking them to plant trees. Whether they have small gardens, they plant trees around as a boundary crop around their small gardens. So the strategy, short term, medium term, and long term, where there is food and income and long-term security. But as you see, since we are doing biodiversity or farming as the forest, we're already protecting the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. I'll get back to you. Let me go back to Ingrid. Ingrid, well, in Uganda, how was the perception? Were the citizenry ready to accept these agroecological technologies? Was it hard for them to buy into it, or how did you go about it?
Yes. Well, in general, I would say the reception is quite well, and for farmers understand that this is important, and it's also something that is passed on through generations. It's not something that like outsiders have to go and tell them. They have a lot of knowledge. I think for most of them, where the problems arise when it comes to diversifying and making and improving biodiversity at farm level is really having the capital to make certain investments, and also gaining the right knowledge maybe for improving certain cropping systems. But in general, yeah, the perception is very good, and farmers are inventive themselves in that regard as well. I mean, I've also met a group of farmers that young farmers that was really keen on maybe in the future like combining their plots more instead of having all like small plots. They would like to make more like a combined communal system where they all profit from the land and they all work on the land together to also improve biodiversity and at the same time crop production on a more communal level.
Thank you, Ingrid. I think we have a question from our viewers, so we'll take a question, then we continue to Judith.
Right. So there is a question. So it says, there is a thinking that quick profit can be made by ignoring biodiversity in agriculture. What can you say to farmers and development actors to promote agrobiodiversity? a business case for biodiversity. I do not know to who exactly the question is directed, but I think both of you could attempt to answer the question. Perhaps Judith first.
Thank you very much. The question is very relevant into our environment here, because in eastern Uganda, people had taken to monoculture, the growing of sugarcane, and there are over 10 factories wanting to have suppliers. And indeed, there was quick profit because they have an off-taker who is the factory. The price is fixed. When they grow, they are assured of money. Then the second crop is the maize. Everybody in Uganda eats maize, every school, every institution, they eat maize flour. So that is also an attraction because every 3 months, you have a source of income. But it's just after years that people have realized how much the soil gets depleted with monoculture. And then we've also realized the gender insensitivity around monoculture, in that the sugarcane is a man's crop. He takes over all the land, grows sugarcane, and he takes all the money. Same with the maize. Because it is big, he does the marketing, but then remember there is no food at home and no source. So there's also from the money they have sold is what they are using to buy food and sauce, and that is not enough. So yes, there is quick money, but I think over time is to talk, to engage, to have a conversation, both with the men and the women in the home, that we need food. It's not money alone. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Judith, for that insight. That yes, there can be quick money by ignoring biodiversity, but you can also have very long-term benefit by integrating biodiversity.
True.
So good, thank you. Ingrid, what is your take on that question?
Yes, thank you. I mean, I very much agree with what Judith also highlighted. I think from what I've seen also, one of the most important things is that in extension work and when talking to farmers and working with farmers, that the level of participation of farmers in the process is very high. So it becomes more like an overall practice that everyone carries, and it's not. That's also something that Judith highlighted, that it needs to be like discussed by both men and women and basically everyone in the community to see how to go about these issues. Because by now yes, the science has shown that all these monocultures and this high turnover of just growing the same crop over and over again, it depletes the soil so much that after a few years you don't have any land to farm left on. Yeah, I would definitely say like make sure that everyone is included in this discussion and show them also what it does, like make it visible for farmers, like what happens if you only engage in this monocultural on these monocultural cropping systems.
Yeah, thank you, boss, for your responses to the question. I hear very similar themes of inclusivity.
Yes.
I hear themes of engagement.
Yes.
I hear themes of making it a process. And I think those are very insightful responses to that question. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think you've received another question. We can go on with another question.
Oh, yes. So, yes, you're getting quite some questions. I have a question here which says, what role does local integrated pest management play among smallholders? How can it work? What challenges do they face? How can they be helped? Ingrid.
Yes, I mean, I would say like local integrated pest management is maybe one of like understanding how these systems work together is one of the most important things for like to really grasp in for smallholder, well, anywhere basically. And that the difficult part about it is that every agroecological zone is different. So it could be very local. It could be like one side of Mount Elgin is facing certain problems, but the other side is not having this pest at all. And key to understanding this is the sharing of knowledge and having very stable networks through which information can be disseminated so that everyone has access to this knowledge as well.
Yeah, good, Ingrid, and I do resonate a lot with you. You know, coming from Uganda and knowing the Elgon areas, for example, it's really interesting to see how there is the low altitude, the medium altitude, and the higher altitude that actually could be adapted to different interventions. So basically, you're almost saying that there is not a single solution that fits all. So in other words, there can be very customized solutions, but there could also be general solutions for integrated pest management. Yeah, thank you, Ingrid, for that.
Yeah, I would like to hear what Judith thinks, because she told us that they've integrated smallholder farmers in 1,000-acre land. And in this acre, we have fruit trees. We have, I'm assuming we have indigenous trees that may not be fruit trees and others that are fruit trees. So I would like to hear what our input is in the pesticide question. Please, Judith.
Thank you very much. In eastern Uganda, where I'm based, it's lowland, and pests are very high, very many. And they keep cropping up and becoming resistant. For example, as fruit farmers, we have the fruit fly. It's a very big problem. But also we are coming from a culture where people are not used to managing pests, to looking at issues of soil fertility, because these were given from where we are coming from. So our role as an agroecological enterprise for Sino-Fruits, this is the element of training that we bring in to the farmers. It is our input. In fact, every beginning of the farm growing season, because we have two, we always bring them together and we talk about key things. One of them is about the management of pests. They are slow to adapt, but I think it's a long-term strategy where we just have to keep talking, and then we use the farm as the demonstration where we can see the good practice. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Judith.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you, Judith. I like particularly the last part where you said use the farm as a demo garden.
Yes.
Practical, and also in my experience, I've learned that farmers do really tend to adopt practices that they have learned practically and so on. So using the farm as a demo, as a learning center is really a good one. Judith, you have another question. It says, resilience among smallholder farmers is cardinal. Uncertainty comes from climate, markets, etc. Any climate uncertainty you can speak about that farmers experience? Judith.
Oh, thank you very much. Climate uncertainty is very real today in Uganda. Some 10, 20 years ago, we had very reliable climate. We knew there were 2 planting seasons. We knew when the first rains come. We knew when the harvesting was. We knew the first rains are heavy, the second season they are less. All this has changed completely. It's very unpredictable. Like this season, we expected rain by August, but the rain started only the second week of September, and they have come very heavy rains, which are not even friendly to planting. They are washing away gardens. Then at times we have very high temperatures when we don't expect, because since June to about August, we've had very high temperatures, which means that people don't have even the vegetables to eat. Most of the things have dried up. They don't have the grass to feed their small animals. So the unreliability of weather, temperatures and rain has affected people, and it is real in their life. So some of the things, and we don't have a culture of irrigation here. It's only picking up small, where government is bringing in small irrigation schemes. So we are still on rain-fed agriculture, and climate uncertainty is real here. And those are some of the issues we need to address.
Yeah, thank you, Judith. And I would like to thank so much the online participants for the engaging questions. It shows how very interesting and how very important the subject really is. And I would also like to thank very much our panelists for really responding very well to the questions.
Yes.
Over to you, Aileen.
Ingrid, I would like to hear, or even as the online audience would like to know, what are your thoughts about the climate change in terms of smallholder farmers adopting biodiversity practices? Tell us more about it.
Yeah, but climate change, as Judith also touched upon just now, it's a huge problem for farmers, and predictability of the weather has decreased a lot in the past few years. It's become much harder to plan accordingly. And also because a lot of farmers struggle having enough capital and enough funds to and enough food to feed their families at times, it makes them very unresilient in their livelihoods. And that is why it's actually so important to have higher biodiversity at farm level to combat some of these climatic issues. Because the reality is that the weather is probably going to even get worse, and it's going to become even more erratic. And the only way to create some sort of resilience is by improving biodiversity at farm level. But the way I see it is, of course, there are things that can be done at farm level, but it's maybe even more so important that it's approached from landscape level, and that it's not only the responsibility of the farmers to maintain this, but that there's also more institutional support for supporting farmers in this change towards more resilient farms, and at the same time create space for farmers also to be the innovators and take charge of this process, and become stewards of their own lives and change.
Oh, thank you, Ingrid. We have another question.
Yeah, Ingrid, thank you. There is a very nice question for you here. It says, as a researcher from the Global North, so from SLU, who worked in Uganda, what surprised you to learn about researching in Africa? And what advice do you have about researching in Uganda? So basically, your experience and all that interested you. Thank you, Ingrid. Go for it.
I would say the number one thing that surprised me so much is how open the farmers were to receiving me and to sharing their stories and their knowledge. I remember I was the first few times I went into the field, I was quite nervous because I thought, like, why would they accept this girl from Sweden who is just coming around to ask some questions? Why would they open up to me? But that really surprised me a lot in general about Ugandan people, that they've been so open and welcoming. And I really hope also that I've done my role justice in listening and respecting them also and their stories. And I think that's the most important thing when you do research in a completely different setting than your own. Well, I think in general it's important that you do that, but especially when you cross so many like cultures and countries, and you do your research somewhere in a completely different area, that you really try to engage yourself and to kind of put yourself in that culture, and also let go as far as it's possible of your ideas of what certain things are supposed to look like, but at the same time also be aware of your perception of the world, because it's shaped very much by where you grew up. And that it's not a bad thing necessarily, it's the reality of things, but just being aware that the way that you look at a problem is maybe very different than what someone who grew up somewhere completely different looks at a problem. And I think maybe, this is a bit idealistically speaking, but I think if we all try to like maintain that like level of respect, and that we can have very fruitful collaborations, but it's very important that there's no like power dynamics that kind of ruin these relationships, because that will also then ruin that rapport that farmers that is already there with farmers, if they feel like people have just been coming in. Because I've also met some farmers that were not as receptive to having me, and it wasn't necessarily me, but in general, getting like outside help and extension services, and were more like, just leave us alone. And it could very well be that there have been some cases where they were not treated well, or maybe like companies had come in and promised them a lot of things and then not lived up to those promises. So yeah, that's a little bit my take on that.
Good, spot on. I wouldn't comment much on it. I resonate so well with the points. So thank you. Yeah.
I have a comment that is a question towards Judith. Judith, you know, you're my neighbor. I come from Kenya. So we are big consumers of matoke. We call them plantain.
Yeah.
And one neighbor learns from another neighbor. So as our able neighbor, Uganda, what can you advise Kenya and the rest of Africa on sustainabilities of trees? And because we do need the land to plant our vegetables, we do need the land to plant our beans and maize. So what can you advise your able neighbors, Kenya and Tanzania and the rest of Africa?
I think the subject we are talking about today, thank you so much, my neighbor, for asking. The subject we are talking about today is very important, the whole issue of biodiversity. And then there are these different issues we are learning and teaching, issues like a companion planting, mixing, mulching, those different terms, because we must know which crop goes with the other. For example, when you grow matoke, which is a typical Ugandan food, you can mix in trees. There are particular agroforestry trees that do very well in matoke. For example, most of our fruit trees, the jackfruit, the avocado, the mango, they can be grown inside the matoke. And also the vegetables and the beans can also be grown inside the matoke. And then the matoke stem is very good for animals. In fact, when you cut it in 2 pieces, put some salt, your animals will feel very well. They don't have to wander off.
Wow.
So the whole issue of mixed farming, companion, doing mulching to preserve moisture in the soil, all those are very important concepts which must make us unique as Africans. Those are the issues that we should be taking to everybody so that whoever comes to Africa can see that uniqueness of how we do biodiversity. Thank you.
Very good. Very
you.
good. I must say yes. Very interesting discussion. We are running a bit out of time, but we do have a last question for both Ingrid and Judith. And the question says, what would you like policymakers to do? And what would you like researchers to work on? So very short answers from both of you to these two questions. First, Ingrid.
I guess I will approach this question a little bit from the research perspective. I think where I clearly saw some gaps in where more research is needed is definitely pest management. I think that will be key to understanding how to improve cropping systems whilst also maintaining high degrees of biodiversity. And at the same time, also create support for farmers to be innovators and not just receivers of technology packages. Like sometimes I feel like it's already such like an old school thing to say that like, oh, farmers are just receivers of technology packages, but in reality it still happens so often. And it's just proven that when farmers are part of the process and they become their own, they are really seen as innovators and as equal partners, that success is so much more long lasting. And maybe also more research in how to like achieve.
Ingrid?
I hope we have not lost you.
Judith? Ingrid? Okay, as we wait for them to get back, we have our able moderator with us.
Yeah, the discussion got so interesting, I decided to get crushed.
We have our able moderator with us. Maybe she can share with us about pest control from Zambia.
I was just curious, like I spent a bit of time in Uganda, and my memories from there are about eating the jackfruit. It was just so nice, and I almost stole the seeds illegally. So I was very curious about what Judith had to say about using that. But also one thing that I was very much surprised about were the tree system, because like where I come from is just a lot of maize and cereals. So I'm really very interested in, I wish we could get them back, in the planting using the trees. So you can have the jackfruit, the matoke, and other crops. So even when you have a sort of a small piece of land, you can have maybe 3 or 4. And for me, that's really where the solution is. Because even in a country like Uganda, where you have sort of a relatively larger population density, and maybe the average farm sizes are not as big, if you can have 3, 4 crops in there, then you can still get the production that you need. Yeah, so is that your experience as well from Kenya, or you have different systems?
Well, you see, unfortunately for us, we had depleted very much of our forest covers. So right now we are really discouraging farming into the forest because we're trying to reintegrate reforestation and bringing it back up to where it used to be. But because people, when they go into the forest, most of the time you find they cut down the trees. Yes. You're supposed to have them in there, not cut them down. So if we could have that version, I think it's really, really good. But right now, from what my government, I'm sure, is doing is more of reforestation.
Okay.
But I really like that. I really needed to hear about that and how they're controlling pests.
Yes.
Because that's another thing, because these pests are a bit diverse. I may be out of my league here when considering pests in plants, because I'm thinking each plant has different pests.
Yes, yes.
So how do you control the pests that are in beans and in jackfruit? You know, that would have been an interesting. And do we have to rely on pesticides? Can we have, they're called agricultural something?
Like the biopesticides, you mean?
Yeah, they're made from the agricultural products, and they're not so much into, they're not infused chemically.
So I think Judith mentioned something about that, and both Ingrid mentioned about using integrated pest management.
Yes.
So this is a system where, for instance, if you have different crops within the same field, so the maize probably would be attacked by something else.
Different.
So if it's just maize, then the pests will spread. But if you have a different crop here, then it sort of acts as a barrier. So it is encouraged that you have more than one crop, so that they act as barriers. Then in that way they don't spread. But also the one crop could even be working to sort of control the other ones. So I think that was very interesting what she shared about how they're using integrated pest management. And I personally like this because then you don't use so much of the chemical fertilizers.
Chemicals,
Yeah, in my experience as well, I was recently looking into this in my country. We have a lot of, because of climate change, so it's getting warmer, it's getting drier. So you find that some of the pests are expanding their habitats. Therefore, it's harder for farmers to control the pests. So what they do is they use more of the pesticides. So it's like today they apply this, tomorrow they apply that. And then if you're just doing that for 5 years, then they develop resistance. I'm sure as a vet, you know about resistance even in animals. So I think they're back.
Welcome back.
Yes.
Welcome back, Judith. Welcome back, Ingrid. I hope you can hear as well. We were just trying to reflect on this discussion of integrated pest management based on what Ingrid shared from our research experience, but also based on what Judith shared based on on-farm practical experience. But I guess we will pause that there in the interest of time.
I can have maybe a very quick question for Judith. She mentioned something about how she uses her farm. I hope I got this correctly, where she uses her farm and allows farmers to come and use that one.
As a demo farm.
As a demo farm. So usually we find that farmers are reluctant to try new technologies on their own small farms because it's an investment of resources. So is this the idea that she's sort of trying to mitigate the risk for them by allowing them to use her farm? I'd just like very quickly some insights on that.
Thank you very much. I think the underlying reason was to bring in farmer because they have very small gardens and we have very big garden, and there is no way you cannot work in the village with the village if you are doing work in the village. So we brought in farmers so that they are able to grow their crops. So it's about food, being able to get food and income. But then also realize that it's much easier to teach any technology, any practice when they are on the farm. So yes, it was taking advantage of what was the existing situation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Judith, before the technology interruptions, Ingrid had almost finished responding to this last question, and I would like to invite you to respond to it quickly as well. What would you like policymakers to do? And as a practicing commercial farmer, what would you like researchers to focus on?
Policymakers, the most important thing, if we can pass the policy, agroecology as an approach to agriculture, to climate smart agriculture, to environmental protection, especially in Africa. Because agroecology is a practice, It's a science and it's a movement. So we would like the policymakers to look at that and do the necessary work. And then within that, we can look at particular things into agroecology. Issues like my family food is African, because if we can start promoting Africans to look at their food, it is one way that we can be talking about agroecology or biodiversity. Yeah. If they can look at the issue of seed, the issue of indigenous trees, the issue of herbs, all this comes with agroecology and biodiversity. And we want it to be a policy issue, especially in Africa. Then I was saying the researchers, we farmers don't have the time to write and document. There is a lot taking place, but we don't have the time to document. So we welcome the students all over the world to come and do the documentation, because that's where they have the strength. We are willing to talk, to share, but we don't have the time to write it down. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Judith.
Thank you so much, Judith. Ingrid, like you have heard, please invite your fellow students to go to the farmers, to go to Judith. They are very open to welcoming you to document the very many things that they are doing which they cannot document. Thank you so much for joining the session. Thank you, everyone. I throw back to our main moderator.
Yeah, and thank you very much. This was a very insightful session. And for now, we take a break. So please, during the breaks, go away from your computers, or if you have to be on your computer, then please use that to mingle with other conference participants. We'll see you after the break. Thank you.